I'm Jill Tolman. I am a speech language pathologist. I've been working with kids, teens, excuse me, toddlers, young adults who are minimally speaking or who have limited or no verbal speech and who use communication technology, working closely with their families, schools, and intervention teams since 1992. I am the owner of Jill Tolman and Associates. We are an occupational therapy and a speech language pathology, augmentative and alternative communication private practice. We have offices in Centennial and Colorado Springs. We see between 130 and 150 individuals each week who use communication technology to communicate. So what we're going to talk about tonight, we're going to go over the Communication Bill of Rights, talk about what AAC is, go over some common myths and facts about augmentative communication and use of communication technology. I'm going to talk to you and educate those of you who aren't familiar or want more information about the differences between speech generating devices and communication applications and how these tools are funded and can be funded. We're going to talk about how to support minimally speaking and non-speaking individuals to communicate and participate fully in their environments. Going to talk about why we all need to work together and team together, and then go through just some examples of tools and activities. So I hope everyone leaves here tonight with some ideas for what to do to help those you love, live with, work with to communicate more. I think Laura, you said that you were looking for tools in addition to augmentative communication. Tonight, we are focusing primarily on augmentative communication. There will be some examples towards the end of the presentation for some tools and apps that can target learning more. I'm happy to talk to you afterwards or set up a time to follow up to answer specific questions. So I want everyone to take a minute to read this Communication Bill of Rights. It is a statement that came out from the National Joint Committee for the Communication Needs of Persons with Severe Disabilities. And I'd like you guys to read it, and then we'll take a minute or two. And if a couple of you want to share with the group what speaks to you and why, I think it's just a great way for us all to get started and really understand that being able to communicate truly is a human right. Does anyone want to start and share with the group what speaks to you and why?
Hi guys, it's Maria here. What really speaks to me is number 14, the right to be addressed directly and not be spoken for or talked about in third person while present. I think it's very important to keep one's dignity. And I think being able to speak for yourself is a huge part of it.
Absolutely, Maria. Anybody else?
I think learning to allow people to refuse and reject undesired objects, actions, events, or choices stands out for me. Because it's it's another like right, yeah, to be able to say no.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
Um, the right to refuse or reject also stood out to me, because especially in preschool, I will see people's bodies being moved, when I feel like they don't have the opportunity to say no. Um, and yeah.
I think the first one, as I look back, is very important. I think that the caretakers, teachers, leaders so often force social interactions and keep people apart who have an interest in being socially connected. And that's a real difficult one because I hadn't realized until just thinking now how often I see that the person did not get the right to interact socially the way that they wanted to.
For sure, Kristen.
I think for me, it's number 13, the right to be treated with dignity and addressed with respect and courtesy. I think a lot of people feel like because that child or that person can't speak or can't communicate, they don't understand. And so they're kind of just pushed to the side and not addressed or respected. So that's a big one for me.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Okay, well, I appreciate everyone taking the time to read it and those of you sharing. And I just think it's really important that tonight and always that, you know, we realize that everybody has the right to communicate. And one of my favorite quotes at the end of this talk is from Daniel Webster, and he says, communication is the essence of human life. So let's jump right in. Challenges to the Communication Bill of Rights. Most natural speakers, regardless of their background and training, are not prepared to interact with individuals who are minimally speaking or who are non-speaking and who use or need to use augmentative communication. Sarah Blackstone is one of our AAC gurus and a pioneer in the field, and she and I were speaking many years ago, and she said this, and I think it's so true. So supporting these individuals, it's not difficult, but it's also not natural until we become comfortable with knowing how to support one another and support them through authentic connections and meaningful relationships. So when we talk about augmentative and alternative communication, the acronym is AAC. It really the AAC supports include gestures, signs, writing, typing, pictures, alphabet boards, speech generating devices, or mobile technologies with communication apps. This is the definition put out by the RARC on augmentative and alternative communication. The RARC is the Rehabilitation Engineering Research Center on AAC, and it's comprised of leaders in the field of AAC who do research at universities across the country. So individuals who use AAC, many have developmental disabilities, many have some level of intellectual disability, many have language that is language that is disordered. Some may have multiple disabilities that could include physical disabilities. Individuals may have sensory impairments, vision impairments, hearing impairments. Individuals may have behavioral challenges. And I think it's fair to say that the majority of individuals who use augmentative and alternative communication rely on others when communicating. So they're really dependent upon the authentic relationships and us as their communication partners to be able to communicate and participate fully in their environments. jumping into myths and fears about AAC. It is 2023, and there are still a ton of myths. While augmentative communication is being used with children at much younger ages, it is still underutilized for our youngest population. So some myths that exist today, and these you'll see and hear me say that these are not true, but commonly held still, was that a young child is not ready for AAC, that young children are not able to understand augmentative communication. Another common myth is that there are prerequisites for using AAC, there are cognitive prerequisites, and that it's not appropriate for children with intellectual disabilities. And I would argue, and the research certainly states, that this is the population that needs to use augmentative communication more than any other population. Romsky and Sevchek are two researchers in the field, and they put this out in 2005 about myths and fears about using augmentative communication with young children, that it's a last resort in speech-language intervention, that AAC hinders or stops further speech development, that again, children must have a certain skill set to benefit from augmentative communication, that AAC technology is only for children without intellectual disabilities, and again, that children have to be a certain age to benefit. What we know, this is a very busy slide, but I just thought it was important to put all of the information in here. So the realities of using AAC that are clearly documented in the research, I mean, going back to 1998, guys, there are no known cognitive or other prerequisites necessary for a child to use augmentative communication. I once heard that the only prerequisite is that an individual is breathing. Now, while that is said, there are clearly skills that individuals need to be able to display to be able to use and access communication devices in meaningful ways. What we do know is development of language skills using augmentative communication can lead to functional improvements in cognition, that AAC intervention for kids helps them develop communication. It promotes cognitive development and can provide the foundation for literacy development, and it certainly improves social communication. And then this is probably one of my favorites, is that early introduction of AAC can aid in the development of natural speech and language, and it can increase both receptive and expressive vocabulary for children younger than 3. So it is never too early to start introducing augmentative and alternative communication. When we talk about AAC, it includes no tech, light tech or low tech, and high tech. No tech includes speech, gestures, facial expressions, body language, and sign language. And signs can be real signs as well as inventive signs. When we're talking about light tech, we're talking about representing language concepts with photos or with symbols. There are some communication systems. The Picture Exchange Communication System, or PECS, is a formal light tech communication system. Pragmatic Organization of Dynamic Display, commonly referred to as POD, is another light tech communication system. Light tech also involves communication boards and displays. You see this example of blowing bubbles here, as well as alphabet boards. So here's just some additional examples. In the top left, this is a POD book that's organized by pragmatic category. The two alphabet displays you see, one is an ABC layout. The other layout that may look a bit unusual is for individuals who rely on scanning. So that board actually is organized like a row at a time based on frequency of letters. And then we have some sentence strips with I want to read and I want to color. When we talk about representing words with pictures, we can use photos and we can use symbols. Some of us are familiar with different symbol sets. We have symbol sticks, we have board makers, picture communication symbols, often called PCS. We have MinSpeak icons, and we have open symbols. I find people tend to be the least familiar with open symbols, and open symbols is a collection of open licensed picture symbols that can be used for communication, for augmentative communication and used on communication displays. Obviously, we can get photos of anything using Google Images, taking pictures on our phones, etc. We also talk about, with light tech, supports for understanding. Here are some examples of visual schedules and first then boards. With the visual schedules and first then boards, sometimes we use pictures or symbols. We can also use objects for those individuals who are not yet understanding picture representations. Additional supports for understanding would include aided language input, sometimes called aided language stimulation. That would be this picture up top, where we're using symbols to aid the language for what we want individuals we work with to understand. I think we all know individuals, certainly some who have autism, where they might not understand spoken language, but they can certainly understand language represented visually. Picture choices and sentence strips are also used to help aid in understanding. When we talk about high tech, we're talking about speech generating devices. These are just some examples. They're referred to as dedicated devices. So these devices are approved by the FDA, they're approved by the FCC, and they are considered to be durable medical equipment. We'll talk about what that means in a minute. Speech generating devices have more capabilities than communication apps. So we'll talk about that in a minute too, but we can download communication apps onto iDevices instantaneously. But when we have a speech generating device, for some, it can work better as it's a more robust package per se. The other thing with speech generating devices, they do provide built-in alternative access options. So these would be for individuals who have multiple disabilities, who are unable to use their hands to directly activate locations on devices. So some have eye gaze capabilities, they have scanning. There's another thing that some devices have, it's called environmental aids to daily living. So this is not on the tablet-based devices, but on the more robust speech generating devices. You can control the TV through your communication device. You can control lights. You can change volume on things. Over time, the environmental aids to daily living aren't needed as much as they used to be because of our virtual digital assistants like Alexa and Siri, and we'll talk about that later too. So speech generating device companies. The device companies provide different levels of support, training, and resources. Some provide loaner devices. And so for some individuals, this is really important. If a communication device breaks and needs to be sent in for repair, the individual essentially is left voiceless. So for that individual, going with a device company that provides loaners might be important. All of the speech generating device companies have resources on their websites. Definitely a silver lining from the pandemic. As good as the websites were, they've all become much better during and since the pandemic. In terms of the speech generating device companies, some have consultants who do live in-person and remote trainings. When we talk about communication applications, There are over 300 communication apps available for immediate download from the iTunes store. The features and cost of the apps can vary greatly. When looking at or considering a communication application, we really want to identify what is optimal for the individual. There are limited options built into communication apps for those who are not able to use their hands to activate their technology and who need to use the alternative access methods like scanning or eye gaze. Something important to note about the communication apps, they're typically not funded in isolation by insurance companies or by state Medicaid programs. The communication apps are available for volume discounts through Apple, so lots of school districts certainly appreciate and use these volume discounts. When we talk about funding, and I know someone had commented before we started that they wanted to know how to get devices. Speech generating devices are considered durable medical equipment. Because of that, the cost or partial cost may be covered by some private or commercial health insurance, depending on the family and individual's durable medical equipment benefit within their insurance plan. And for this to happen, one, there needs to be a benefit and a durable medical equipment benefit, and then also medical necessity needs to be established. So, for example, the individual has autism and is minimally verbal, or the individual has autism and is unable to speak. So autism is the medical condition that provides the medical necessity for a communication device. Speech generating devices are covered by Medicare and by state Medicaids when medical necessity is established and when criteria are met. To be covered or submitted to insurance, to Medicare and or to Medicaid, there's certain requirements. One is that the individual for whom the device is being recommended must have an evaluation by a speech language pathologist, looking at different devices and clearly documenting what is going to be optimal for the individual and why. A prescription must be written by the individual's physician. And then there are other requirements that are specific to the payer, whether it's the insurance company or Medicare or Medicaid. For example, some insurance companies might require a 3-month rental of the device that the insurance company will cover before paying for the device. Colorado Medicaid requires a face-to-face encounter with the physician where the individual and their family go in and meet with the doctor to discuss what is being recommended and why. And the doctor has to not only provide a prescription, but document in their office visit notes that the device was discussed. Now, the communication device companies do have report templates for speech therapists to use to help assist them in recommending and submitting to insurances for these devices for their clients. Does anyone have any questions about funding communication devices before I go on to the next piece?
I do. From what I understand, Cherry Creek School District is where my son attends school. They use some of these AAC that you showed in the previous slide. They use them in school, but from what I understand is the kids don't actually get to keep them, the actual machine. So would Medicaid cover whatever machine that is being used at school to be purchased to keep at home?
Okay, so I can't speak specifically to what Cherry Creek is providing to your child. I know that, let me do this, Laura, let me just jump to, let me just jump here and we'll come back, right? So, so the answer is yes. What the insurance companies and Medicaid will not do, they will not fund just an iPad with a communication app, right? But they will fund a tablet-based solution, if you will, that is a communication device. So with it being the speech generating device, with the communication app, that would be funded as long as, like, the speech therapist did the evaluation, you know, you trialed different devices to determine what would be best, and all of medical necessity is established and submitted. So I would encourage you to explore getting your child their own device.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, the device my son would like to use is the iPad, unfortunately, and that's the biggest problem we're
Yeah.
having.
Well, and I think sometimes what happens, because, you know, that's what we would consider mobile technology. So it would be like a communication app on the iPad. For lots of individuals, we'll recommend that the device, the communication app, be locked into guided access so that your child would only see it or know it as a communication device, because it's really hard to go back and forth, and we can never compete with YouTube, right?
Right.
So,
Okay. Thank you.
yeah, for sure. So talking about communication apps, and guys, some of this gets a little confusing, so please interrupt me. The communication applications, right? Remember some of these, and I skipped over this, but these are just examples of some of the most commonly used communication apps. This is Go Talk Now, Avaz, Predictable, Proloquo to Go, TD Snap, Touch Chat, and Cough Drop. The communication apps are funded when they're funded as part of the speech generating device. They're typically not funded by insurances, and they're definitely not funded by Colorado Medicaid by themselves. I'm not aware of what other state Medicaids do. In terms of the communication apps themselves, because sometimes families just want the app and they, they don't want to go through the insurance process, and they just want their child to have the app and use the app on an iPad. So some well-known and widely used communication applications up until this point have been 50% off twice a year. Once in April for National Autism Acceptance Month, and then once in October for International AAC Awareness Month. So that's really helpful to know. And then, Laura, this will speak to funding in school districts, right? In terms of purchasing a speech generating device, school districts are the payers of last resort. Many districts do provide communication apps and iDevices to students. So it sounds like that in your case, that's what has been done. It's important that we all know that what the districts provide to the students should go back and forth between home and school, and students should have access to the devices during breaks. And this is mandated in IDEA. So some school districts are better about this than others, but it is absolutely illegal not to have a device sent home. And if the school says it can't come home, that is not true. There are definitely advantages and disadvantages of using a district-owned device, something that we're starting to see almost like the second generation of kids happening to. So the devices belong to the schools, to the school district. So once kids leave the schools at 21, they have to give the devices back. So I really caution everybody that, prior to kids leaving school, that families really understand this, and that high school students and students in transition undergo a thorough augmentative communication evaluation to see if the device and the app that they're using is what's optimal for the child, for the individual, and to pursue that insurance process before the devices have to be turned in. The other piece is a lot of the communication applications are highly customized for the individual. And it's just heartbreaking to see and hear that, a student used this device all through school, and then the device was wiped out over the summer, or, the family moved and there was just no continuity in making sure that individuals had their voices and had the language programs and that customized vocabulary that they wanted and needed. This is specific to Colorado, that Colorado through CDE, Colorado Department of Education, there is a statewide assistive technology, augmentative, alternative communication teams throughout the state. Not all, but the majority of school districts do have SWAC teams. The SWAC teams are multidisciplinary assistive tech teams, and they provide services to students with disabilities who need to use all forms of assistive technology, including augmentative communication. SWAC is housed at the Center for Inclusive Design and Engineering. This used to be called Assistive Technology Partners. For those of you who are familiar, they're affiliated with University Hospital. And then they also, Colorado Department of Ed SWAC team, they have our state's assistive technology dollars. So there's also a loan library that districts can access to trial different communication devices with students. Any questions on funding and this information before we move on?
Thank you so much for sharing this.
Of course. Okay.
Can I ask one more question? What
Of
about
course.
those who speak other languages? Does it become more difficult to get, because I'm guessing that that's more expensive also because of the different language? So
No, it's kind of appalling actually that some devices don't come in so many languages, but there certainly are bilingual options, and it's very common to have a device funded and then to get a speech synthesizer within the device within English, and then also within the individual's native language.
and that doesn't become a problem to get it covered if you just speak a different language.
Nope. And not only that, we currently have 2 individuals in our practice. One is a 5th grader and one is a 9th grader, and they are native English speakers, and they're learning Spanish in schools, and just saying that not just saying, but clearly documenting the need for the Spanish synthesizer to be able to participate in class. Those Spanish synthesizers were also approved by insurances.
Great. Thank you.
Of course. So individuals who are minimally verbal or who do not speak, when they are supported, they communicate and participate. When they're not supported, they may not communicate and participate. And we see this across ages, across abilities, and across all levels of communicators. So I think this is really important, regardless of an individual's ability and disabilities. They not only have the right to communicate, but they can communicate. And when they're supported to, they communicate beautifully. So to help those with severe communication impairments communicate, what do we need to do? Well, we certainly need to evaluate so that we can make sure the communication solutions that are recommended are individualized, they're age appropriate and developmentally appropriate, and they're set up for the individual to use to communicate what they want to communicate, and that they're motivating. So how do we do this? Again, I said assessment. And I'm just going to read this quote, that the goal of assessment is not to fit the client to a particular device or communication strategy, but it's to identify the strategies that enhance the individual's strengths to maximize their independent communication and ultimately their ability to exert control over their world. So this came out from Lund and her colleagues. This goes right back to the Communication Bill of Rights. So it's really important that we understand we don't necessarily want the latest, greatest, best thing or the thing that, you know, my friends have or my friends' kids have, but it's really what's going to be best for the individual child or the individual young adult. So how we go about this is through dynamic assessments, and they can be informal or formalized processes. So dynamic assessments are always ongoing. They must be individualized. We have to support the individual and their family's preferences and desires. You know, this is just me. I have a really hard time with an entire district giving every single student who needs augmentative communication an iPad with the same communication app and the same vocabulary. We have to really be mindful with what we're doing. That communication solutions need to accommodate growth and changes over time. We always want to maximize efficiency and explore new technologies. So as things change and come out that can help individuals communicate more effectively and you know, and more efficiently, we want to look at that. And we always want to support all modes of communication. So my classic example, this is a picture of Evan, is, you know, for Evan to walk in a room and he's carrying his talker and someone to say, hey, Evan, tell everybody your name. Well, we already know his name, right? So we never want to ask somebody to tell us something that we already know. Talking about dynamic assessments, so we really want to determine what's optimal for the individual based on their current communication and language skills, based on their cognitive abilities, based on their physical and motoric abilities. We need to look at their vision and hearing and sensory preferences. We want to look at their behavior. Oftentimes, especially with individuals with autism, their behavior can be communication, and it often is. We want to look at an individual's literacy skills, their attention skills, and the environment that they want and need to be able to communicate it. We don't have time to go into this, but I think it's super important that we know that culturally responsive AAC resources exist. Gloria Soto and her group at San Francisco State have put together a wonderful array of culturally responsive resources, and this continues to grow. So I will make sure that Kirsten gets this handout after to send to all of you, and I encourage everybody to really familiarize themselves with it. When we talk about supporting fine motor skills, there are things called key guards. So if you look closely here, this is a communication device with a farm animal display, and you can see around the animals, there's like this black grid. So that is a key guard. Key guards can be used to clearly define spaces between buttons or locations on communication devices. And they can also help increase the accuracy and decrease accidental button activations. I'm going to show you an example of touch guides in a minute. And then there are things within the communication devices and also within some of the communication apps called access settings. And that just means how long do I have to push to release and hold down for the device to talk. So I'm sure we all know individuals who are just like iPad, 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 iPad. Sometimes just increasing that hold down time from nothing to 0.2 of a second could make it just harder to activate. And all of a sudden, we're going to see over time, the individual is activating the device one time. These are example of touch guides. So again, this is just a clear piece of plexiglass. And then if you look closely, you can see there are these circles in the middle of each button that you would just push to activate. So there are peripherals or tools we can use to help individuals as they're developing their motor skills to be able to communicate as efficiently as possible. I don't know that we have anybody on the call or on Zoom who is working with or living with individuals who have physical impairments or limited mobility, but I just wanted to throw this in there for our friends who have physical impairments and limited mobility and rely on wheelchairs. Seating and positioning is critical to successful use of AAC. So these individuals need to be optimally seated and positioned in their wheelchairs so they can access technology using those alternative access methods. And some of those alternative access methods include scanning, auditory scanning, eye gaze, and head pointing. So how do we support individuals using communication technology? I always like to say we need to have a roadmap. There could be lots of detours along the way. We could get a little lost before we get back on the right road, but we have to have a plan to know where we're going. So what we want to consider are the individual's communication needs. What does the individual want to say? What do they need to say? What communication environments are they in? So where will they be communicating? Are there different needs and expectations throughout the day when they're with different communication partners? And then for some individuals, it doesn't just have to be one tool. We might use different strategies and different tools. But again, this has to be really customized and thought out to figure out how to support the individual to communicate and participate as efficiently and easily as possible. And again, I mentioned this a minute ago. Who are the individual's communication partners? How someone communicates at home with immediate family members could be very different than how they communicate or how they communicated with extended family over Thanksgiving. Communicating with familiar teachers and paras and peers can be different than communicating with office staff. The same goes with staff at day programs and when individuals are out in the community. And then what are the different communication modes? Again, we always want to maximize an individual's ability to communicate using facial expressions, using gestures, using vocalizations, any speech that the individual might have. All of that needs to be acknowledged and encouraged. So Kate Ahern is another woman in the field, and I think what she has said, this really speaks to me, and I hope it'll speak to you too. I'm just going to read it. Communication is about connection, not symbols, not requesting, not turn taking, not fine motor skills, not testing, not being drilled, but connecting. Communication is what makes us human and humane. The ability to understand each other through words and actions, and silence and stillness is essential. So I think that's really important too, because oftentimes, or I should say too often, we see that individuals are not given robust communication systems, and what's in there is not all that they want or that they need. Individuals who are minimally speaking or who don't speak with their mouths, they need to use language for a variety of purposes. Here I just listed some of like the typical language functions, why we communicate. The one thing that might be a little unfamiliar is to participate. So one of the main reasons we all communicate with one another is for social closeness. to feel connected with one another and to feel part of what's going on. So David Buchelman, who was another pioneer in the field, and unfortunately he passed away during COVID. This is one of my favorite quotes from him. So again, I'm just going to read it, and I just want everyone to listen. He says, "I believe that to some extent, the public has been deceived by believing the illusion that AAC technology by itself causes someone to talk who cannot speak." So what we realize, giving someone a communication device is just the start of the journey. We have to make sure that it's set up and has the vocabulary that individuals want to communicate, that they need to be able to communicate. And we have to support them to be able to successfully communicate. Something else that David Buchelman said was that giving someone a communication device and expecting them to be able to use it is like giving someone a basketball and expecting them to be a basketball player, or giving someone a piano and expecting them to be a pianist. So we have to remember, going back to that slide, when individuals who have severe communication impairments are supported to communicate, they're able to do so, and they do so well. And we see this across ages, across abilities, and across disabilities. So what the literature tells us, here we go, Buchelman and Pat Miranda, they introduced the participation model for AAC interventions over 30 years ago. And they said that the purpose of AAC interventions are to facilitate meaningful communication and participation in daily life activities. So now here I go again on my soapbox, that AAC interventions, strategies, and tools have to be individualized. They need to be age appropriate and developmentally appropriate. And it's not about us as the providers, for those of us who are on this call, who are educators or therapists. It's really what the individual and the family wants. And then it's our job to all work together to make sure the communication solutions support communication as efficiently and effectively as possible. So for communication solutions to be successful, we need to identify initial communication strategies and tools, and again, customize for individuals. So I have always believed wholeheartedly that whatever those solutions are, need to be highly customized, because what I communicate and kind of what my language my family uses could be very different and should be very different than what you communicate. So they need to be customized for individuals to reflect their preferences and to enable them to communicate and actively participate as fully and as effectively as possible. Before I jump into the next section, anyone have any questions or comments or thoughts?
I was typing a question, but I'll just say it now. Oh, from what it sounds like you're saying, and this is a very new topic for me that I don't know much about, but I want to know more. If I am guiding a family, and they're saying that, maybe they're going to get a device through school, would it be advisable for them to also have private work with a speech language pathologist to do this customization, individualization, and then kind of partner with them for their whole developmental life if possible, so they could continue that trajectory rather than it just being in the hands of a school professional who may not, be able to have the resources to individualize as much? I really don't know.
Yeah, so I think my answer would be it just depends. I think, something that's really nice today is that the communication apps and the programming of the devices are much easier, say, than they were 30 something years ago when I started. That being said, I think when families can partner with teams, and the family really needs to figure out what that best team is, right? So that we want the families to understand and know how to support the technology, how to support their child. We work closely with school teams all the time. If I had to make a blanket statement, it would be, and what I've heard from the schools would be like, gosh, can you guys do the programming, or, family, can you do the programming? Because school therapist, I only have 45 minutes a week with her, and I don't want to spend my time programming the device, right? So I think it's just really, when we're talking about teaming, really figuring out what the kiddo needs to be successful, and then how that family can put the team together so that everyone takes a part. Does that kind of answer it?
That does. Thank you.
Sure. And I think the other piece is, just going back to the basketball and the basketball player analogy, this for individuals to be successful using augmentative communication, and when I mean successful, for them to communicate what they want to say, what they need to say authentically, and also for them to develop language. Like what I always say when we talk about augmentative and alternative communication, for most of the individuals we work with, they have limited or no speech, but they have language. So the majority of individuals we work with have a gap between what they understand and what they can say. And due to a variety of reasons, they're not often able to talk with their mouths. So to help them develop language, they really need ongoing speech language intervention. And I think wherever they can get that, I would encourage them to get that. Any other thoughts or comments or questions on that? Okay, so I have some examples of just teaching vocabulary that I'm just going to run through pretty quickly. So when we're introducing vocabulary, we want to do so during familiar routines, daily activities, and highly motivating activities. Because if I'm not interested in something, I mean, you've lost me before we've even started. So when customizing the vocabulary, again, and one more time, I'm going to say it, we want to use vocabulary that the individual wants to communicate, and that the individual needs to communicate. We want to use pictures and symbols that the individual understands. And then to help them communicate as efficiently and effectively as possible, we want to be consistent with like where we put vocabulary and how individuals can flip between screens. That's what we call navigation. And I'll show you that in a minute. So this is our friend Griffin. And he's little, right? So if we look at some of the pictures, like this I feel button, this is a symbol from a widely used symbol set called symbol sticks. Well, we know from the research with the young kids that these symbols are terrible, right? I mean, that's what we all use, and the kids learn them. It's not that they don't, but kids are drawn to faces. So it was much better to have pictures of him being happy, of him being mad, and of course, my favorite, that his parents said, this is him when he's done and he's saying, I need a break. So again, for Griffin, these pictures were way more meaningful to him than the line drawing pictures. So these pictures were taken when he was like just over 2. He's in kindergarten now, and these are still the feelings pictures that he uses on his device. So talking about motivating vocabulary for Jasper, he's super motivated by his mom, his grandma, and also by Moana. So for him, Moana is a person. And then we're giving him some song choices. For an older individual, making choices between artists is what's most important. When we talk about initial communication displays, This was an initial display of Nolan and his grandma. And here we have some activity choices. Then as things expand, when I talked about consistent location, and guys, just for time's sake, I'm just kind of giving you like a crash course in just some brief points and maybe some takeaways. So here on the left, where you see the play page, and on the right, bubbles, you'll see like the pictures for more, want, and go are in the same location on his play page, and bubbles is in the same location on the play page as it is on the bubbles page. Sorry, I was just setting the alarm for myself, so I saw how much more time I had. Anyway, so providing vocabulary in consistent locations just decreases the cognitive load. As we're expanding, again, he can now expand from bubbles to where are we going to blow the bubbles? So the picture in the bottom right can introduce prepositions. We're going to blow them up. We're going to blow them down. If you look at the picture of the display in the far left, it's a talk page where he can make comments. I want to turn. Let's do it again. On all three of these displays, you can see that the go back and then the beginning, that's what we call navigation buttons, how we're going to get off of a page and where it's going to go, are also in consistent locations. So talking about communication for participation, these are just some examples of what an about me page can look like for an individual. I think, certainly we want, or, people think it's important that someone should be able to say their phone number and their address. And I'm not saying that that's not important, but I can tell you for Meg, she's way more excited to tell us about her dog and about her pet, and that she likes to play sports. Looking at some other displays, this is Carissa, who's a young adult. So what you see here, the buttons that are white are for her to make statements and share information about herself. And then the buttons that are yellow is for her to ask a question. So my name is Carissa. What's your name? I go to this day program. Where do you go? My birthday is, when is your birthday? So I think we all get that idea. We want individuals to be able to communicate efficiently. Playing games is something that's really fun that we can do regardless of our age. So these are just two examples of playing Pop-Up Pirate on the left and Connect 4 on the right, where again, you see vocabulary that's consistent, whether it be a high five or how many swords we're going to take out or how many Connect 4 launchers we're going to launch, or in the same location. We also want vocabulary and messages to be age appropriate. So here's just some examples of this. How do we find age appropriate vocabulary? Well, we talk to siblings and to peers. Here's an example of someone who's really jazzed by greetings. So we don't just have to say hi, but lots of different greetings. Just some examples of comments. I'm going to kind of go through some of these kind of quickly. Age appropriate and fun. Hey girl, TMI, just saying, that's tight. I would if I could, what the heck, that's crazy. We find that as individuals get older, and I'm talking like as old as 6 or 7, once they really see the power of their communication, they want to have input in what's added to their devices. So that's really fun. We want individuals to be able to customize their vocabulary and their layouts. So Ruth is the young woman who is in the wheelchair. She is all about the NFL, so it's hard to see, but in the bottom picture, she has added all of the football teams and color-coded, and then up top is basketball, and then this is her keyboard. She wanted to make everything purple, so go for it, right? More examples of customized pages. This is our friend Uriah, who had a crush on Amy, and we programmed in his device, "Your eyes are stunning, you're beautiful." He was super motivated to use the vocabulary. Something we want to make sure to do is maximize features on the communication devices and within the apps. So visual scenes where you take a picture and you put it on a whole page or part of a page on a communication app. So here Max is go-karting. Visual scenes are great when an individual is a student or the person of the week. Visual scenes can be used for project-based learning, for reports, great for sharing at family get-togethers, digital assistants, like I talked about earlier with Alexa and Siri. There are great ways for sharing, asking questions. This is an example of visual scenes that Lawton's mom put together for him to share information about their spring break trip. So again, you take the picture and you put it in, and in the top left, he was saying where Sanibel Island was. This is an example of somebody's page in their communication device for them interacting with Alexa. So Alexa has great things where you can say, "Alexa, what's in the news?" And it will read the top stories for the day. What will the weather be tomorrow? Sing a Christmas song. They have some really funny things, like torpedoes, beatbox. Father says a funny Star Wars thing, like, "I am your father." You can tell it to stop. Alexa, shuffle fart jokes with farts. Tell me something funny. So there's just a bunch of ways that individuals can interact using their communication apps with digital assistants. So why we love Alexa. To date, I can't talk about iOS 17 because we've not yet messed around with Siri since iOS 17 came out in October, but we have found that Alexa responds much better to synthesized speech. So the speech that's in the communication devices and the communication apps, much more so than Siri. So individuals who talk with technology can use their devices. So I'm going to play this. Meg is going to ask Alexa to do something. I think to bark like a dog is what she says.
Bark. Here's Megan.
So you can see both Meg and her therapist and Ava really enjoyed that. We must be mindful when we're teaming together. This kind of, Kirsten, possibly goes back to, how you're supporting and advising people. So we must be mindful and work together. We need to develop a plan for how to integrate the individual's ability to communicate and participate for kids who are in school, how they can demonstrate knowledge, how they can ask for help. For young adults and adults, what do they need to be successful in their transition programs and in their community programs? It's really shared responsibility for all of us supporting the individual who needs to use the communication. We need to identify what works best, when and why. And then this cannot be understated that all of us need help and need to watch other people who know how to support the individual who is minimally verbal or who is non-speaking to be successful. Going back to that Sarah Blackstone quote, knowing how to support individuals who use AAC is not natural, and none of us were trained to know how to do it. So we all do and learn best when we're doing things that are predictable, familiar, motivating, and fun, when we're doing things we enjoy, when we're doing things that we're familiar with, and then when we do and practice new skills during authentic interactions. So the motto of our practice and part of our mission statement, our motto is, if we're not having fun, the individuals we work with aren't having fun. And we like to lead with love, because we're really not here to therapize individuals, but we're here to play and have fun and learn and be supportive and encourage communication during authentic interactions. I'm going to skip this video for time, guys. So how do we accomplish this? We want to use materials, technology, activity-based routines, project, daily activities, conversations that are relevant, that are repetitive, meaningful, and predictable. The predictable and repetitive nature is important for the individuals we're supporting and also important for us. So we know what we're doing and we know how to support them. We also want to be spontaneous whenever we can, because I feel like spontaneity is really where the magic happens, as it provides opportunities for authentic and spontaneous communication. We want to build choices into activities and routines. Lots of ways to do this, whether it be morning meeting, circle time, or check-in. Examples of tools and activities can be playing games, websites, stories, recipes, pictures, seasonal activities, like we always say, from the start of summer, like through Earth Day. There are so many activities that we can do that happen every single year, right? From like, you know, after Earth Day through Memorial Day, we're kind of in this funky spot, but we get through it. So talk about projects, holidays, celebrations, parties, use of apps, smart devices, and digital assistants. These are some of our favorite games. I know Autism Community Store has many, if not all of these. The one thing with these games that we like too is other than Guess Who, which can be, you know, a little higher level and maybe headbands, but the other ones, pretty much any age, any ability, people can use. We also use YouTube a lot. YouTube has everything from books to songs to recipes. A couple quick hacks within YouTube. You can slow down the rate of the video if that helps. And then my favorite hack from the pandemic, whenever you pull up a YouTube video, if you put a dash or a hyphen between the T and the U in tube, then there are no commercials. So someone had asked about other apps for school. A couple that we use a lot. Pictello is an app that's $19.99, so $20 from a company called Assistive. And there's endless ideas for projects, for reports, for sharing information. Symbol Support is an app. It's a little more expensive. It's $60 from Attainment Company. Can be used for writing, for creating schedules, for reading supports. There's so many things we can do with photos. We can use photos for individuals to narrate what they're doing, to share information. We can edit photos. We can add texts. There are fun picture apps like Pic Collage and Holiday Picket. Examples of themes and activities would be check-ins, greeting one another. Again, that social closeness. How are you? What's going on? Talking about the weather, talking about time. Time and holidays are universal concepts that are relevant to everyone. We talked about this before. Calendar, days, months, seasons, and holidays. Time, we find, really gives us a framework to talk about past, current, and future events. Seasonal activities are wonderful. Here's just an example of a Halloween customized page in someone's communication device. This is Angel. He was putting together his Thanksgiving plate, what he wanted for Thanksgiving. Clearly, cupcakes and peanut butter were bigger hits than turkey. I'm going to skip that. For teaming, again, you know, it's important to develop time to meet, to plan, to support, to help the individual and to help one another. I think I talked about this in response to your question, Kirsten, that really is shared responsibility to support individuals' ability to communicate. We want to identify what works best, when, and why, provide individuals with opportunities to use lots of different tools. So Now more than ever, we really must be teaching language. We must be supporting participation. We must be working together and providing individuals with needed individualized tools that are optimal for them. I talked about this quote at the beginning, that communication is the essence of human life, by Daniel Webster. And then I always like to end, before I open it up for questions, with this wonderful, amazing quote by Bob Williams. The silence of speechless is never golden. We all need to communicate and connect with each other, not just in one way, but in as many ways as possible. It's a basic human need, a basic human right, and more than this, it is a basic human power. So, phew, got through that, guys. 10 minutes to spare. Questions, comments?
In the chat, we have, how does Google Assistant do with synthesized speech? Do you know about that one?
Yes, I do not personally use it, but we have at least 3 families that use it all the time, so it does well.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
How do you feel about me either sharing this recording or like pictures of the slides?
Yeah, so what I can do is you can share the recording. I have permission to use the photos for presentations, but when I'll send the handout, I will take most of the pictures out.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
And I'll send a handout and the link to our YouTube, which is where the recording will live, to all who registered and came to the training.
Okay, great. And then, guys, I would just say, follow us on social media. Our Facebook page is Jill Tolman and Associates. Our Instagram is JTA AACOT. We try and really, most of what we post is just pictures of kids, teens, and young adults, doing authentic things. So. Well, I thank everybody for your time, and I hope this was helpful. I'd welcome any and all feedback or suggestions. So if you can send that to Kirsten and Maria, that'd be awesome.
We thank you so much for your time and effort and energy tonight, and as well as to all of the folks that find you in your practice. So thank you. And all of you, yes, please contact us if you want to contact Jill for any questions or need more resources in this department. And I would just like to say, I literally was talking to a woman today who couldn't get on this tonight, but she did not know about the whole thing with kids, it being a right to take your device home from school. She said their district isn't letting that happen. So I'm definitely going to follow up with her and let her know they have to. So thank you for that.
Of course, of course.
All right, folks, we're going to go ahead and say goodbye. Thank you.